Defenders, dear colleague, I am Patricia Elias, the Chief of Diplomacy of Every Woman Treaty, and we are pleased to welcome you today to our event. We are pleased and we are very thankful to our 4 nations that are the Antigua and Barbuda, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Sierra Leone, and Costa Rica to have been leading the call for an optional protocol to CEDAW. I will not be speaking a lot because I will leave the floor to, and also we are very much thanking our former Special Rapporteurs and the actual Special Rapporteur that is coming for their call for an optional protocol. You may know that since 30 years, the creation of the mandate of Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls, there have been like 5 Special Rapporteurs only, and we have 4 of them calling for the optional protocol to CEDAW. I will not be long, I will introduce our esteemed Honorable Minister Samantha Marshall from an introductory speech.
It's at the head table and our esteemed guests. Good morning. I'm deeply honored to join in such a crucial discussion on the margins of the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, co-hosted by Antigua and Barbuda with Every Woman Treaty, an incredible organization doing transformative work. To share a few thoughts on the theme, the necessity of a new optional protocol to CEDAW to end violence against women and girls. We find ourselves at a critical juncture in our global pursuit of gender equality and the protection of women's rights. The UN's legal framework for advancing and safeguarding these rights rests upon the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and the Optional Protocol, often hailed as the International Bill of Rights for Women. However, even with this significant milestone, we face a glaring gap: the urgent need for a new optional protocol to CEDAW to combat the pervasive issue of violence against women and girls. The Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, through General Recommendation number 35, highlighted a deficiency in setting universal standards to combat gender-based violence. Violence against women, framed as a form and manifestation of gender-based discrimination, serves as a tool to subordinate and oppress women globally. The global statistics that we face are staggering. I dare say alarming. With an estimated 736 million women, 1 in 3 having experienced physical or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or even both. These numbers represent not just statistics, but the lived experiences of our mothers, our sisters, our aunts, our daughters, our nieces, our goddaughters, and even our friends. The repercussions extend beyond immediate harm, impacting mental and reproductive health and perpetuating a cycle of suffering. Globally, women and girls continue to be subjected to femicide, with nearly 89,000 intentional deaths recorded in 2022, the highest in the past 2 decades. Yet against this backdrop, we grapple with the lack of a universally accepted legal framework to explicitly define, criminalize, and prevent various forms of violence against women. Compounding these challenges are the pressing issues of our time: the COVID-19 crisis, the cost of living crisis, the proliferation of conflicts and climate change. Women are now facing new and emerging forms of violence rooted in misogyny, patriarchy, and the dogmatic beliefs impacting every aspect of their lives: safety, dignity, freedom, and their equal and full participation in society. Today, we call upon nations worldwide to negotiate the proposed new optional protocol under the CEDAW Convention. But we are not blind to the challenges that lay ahead. Negotiations face obstacles such as cultural divides, politicization of gender issues, and resistance from very conservative countries. As we navigate these challenges, I am reminded that the issue of violence against women and girls is deeply woven into the fabric of our societies. It transcends borders and impacts us all. I aspire to see a paradigm shift, acknowledging the societal change is ambitious, but yet it is attainable. International law can accelerate it, global consensus can entrench it, and individual responsibility can make it a global standard. In closing, I implore each one of you that are here today to support the proposal of an optional protocol under the CEDAW Convention. Violence against women and girls is not just a women's issue. It is an existential threat to the sustainable development of our countries. Let us stand united and resolute in our commitment to tackle this issue head on and create a world where every woman and every girl can live free from the shackles of violence. Thank you.
For your tremendous effort, for together with your team. Thanks to Antigua and Barbuda. Let me give the floor now to His Excellency Ambassador Zénon Ngay Mukongo from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Thank you, Excellency, for your presence.
Thank you very much. Madam Moderator, first of all, I would like to welcome Her Excellency Minister of State in charge of gender affairs of the Republic of Antigua and Barbuda, and thank her for her opening remarks. I salute the presence of the other members of a core group of friends of a new optional protocol, including the representative of Costa Rica and Sierra Leone. I also welcome Ms. Rim Al-Salem, a United Nations Special Rapporteur on violence against women and girls, its causes and consequences, as well as all of the other former UN Special Rapporteurs who all together are joining their voices in advocating for the establishment of a new optional protocol to the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women and girls. My thanks go to Ms. Patricia Elias of Every Woman Treaty for organizing this meeting to enable us to discuss the necessity for this protocol. Today's meeting is in line with what was done in Geneva last December, where our 4 states, Antigua and Barbuda, Costa Rica, Sierra Leone, and my own country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, issued a joint statement on the launching of 16 of activism against gender-based violence to express our collective concern about the rise of sexual violence against women and girls in the world. Despite progress in recognizing and addressing gender-based violence, it's remained a pervasive global problem affecting millions of women and girls. Globally, women and girls continue to be victims of, is that femicide or feminicide?
Femicide.
Femicide. Femicide. Because I translate from French to English, so
yes.
I'm kind of
Femicide.
confused.
Yes.
In French we say feminicide. Now here we say femicide, or gender-based homicides. According to the joint report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes and UN Women on femicide, nearly 89,000 women were intentionally killed in 2022, the highest annual number recorded in the past 2 decades. In addition, according to UN Women, nearly 736 million women, or nearly 1 in 3 women, have experienced physical or sexual violence at least once in their lives. Added to this are the rates of depression, anxiety, disorders, unplanned pregnancies, sexually transmitted infection, and HIV, as well as many other health problems that persist after violence. The data therefore shows that incidents of violence against women and girls are only increasing. In front of this black picture, while acknowledging the extraordinary changes brought into women's rights around the world by the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, we believe that the time has come for a new optional protocol to be adopted to strengthen its influence and impact, expanding its capacity to address the particular human rights violations of violence against women and girls. A new optional protocol specifically to end violence against women and girls within the framework of a convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women will be an essential tool for international cooperation and action. As a legally binding instrument, this optional protocol will provide a unique opportunity to consolidate the global feminist movement around a single goal and complement the work of the 3 regional treaties on violence against women, including the Convention of Berlin, the PARA, the Maputo Protocol, and the Istanbul Convention. It will establish clear guidelines and mechanisms for states to prevent, investigate, and prosecute all forms of violence against women and girls, ensuring accountability and justice for survivors. In addition, such protocol will strengthen the visibility and prioritization of gender-based violence as a fundamental human rights issue, thereby reinforcing the commitment of states to eradicate it in all its forms. By integrating gender equality and women's rights into national legal frameworks and policies, the protocol will contribute to transformative change in societies, promoting a culture of respect, dignity, and equality for all. In summary, a new optional protocol to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and Girls to end violence against women and girls is not only necessary but imperative in the global struggle for gender equality and the protection of women's rights, human rights. Its adoption will represent a major step forward in collective efforts to create a world free of violence and discrimination for all women and girls. We therefore all call on all states to join this call. Thank you for your attention.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for being here with us. Very, very happy to see so many interested people in this issue. And allow me to also greet the Honorable Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Your Excellency, Ambassador of the DRC, and dear colleagues, fellow panelists. I would like to join on behalf of Costa Rica the strong call that the Honorable Minister of Antigua and Barbuda just made. It is indeed the violence against women. It is an issue that concerns every one of us. And Costa Rica is a country that fully believes and supports multilateralism and the tools that multilateralism gives us to provide solutions for the problems and needs we face, especially when it comes to human rights. And so this quest, this endeavor that our countries have taken a step on is about that. It's about opening a discussion on what are the instruments, what are the available tools that multilateral system, particularly the possibility of an optional protocol, could give us to address such a pervasive issue as violence against women and gender-based violence. Let me say in the first place, as my previous panelists also mentioned, that we understand around 75% of all women in the world lack access to a treaty specific to violence against women and girls. And of course, this has consequences on the ground about on the lives of women and girls. The WHO, or the World Health Organization, has called violence against women devastatingly pervasive. Globally, more than 1 in 3 women will experience intimate partner or sexual violence. But I would also like to address the economic cost of that violence. Costs associated with violence against women total 5.5% of the global economy. That is 4.7 trillion. The economic burden includes reduced productivity and strained judicial, social services, education, and healthcare systems. Survivors themselves experience higher healthcare costs and significant lost wages. But definitely beyond the economic impact lies the issue of justice and the fight against impunity for all women and girls. So we have references to violence against women in international and regional treaties. We know that in our region, for instance, in 1994, we commemorate 30 years of the creation of the Convention on Belém do Pará, which was the first international treaty in the world to consecrate the right of all women and girls to live free from violence. We have other instruments as well, such as the Maputo Convention, the Istanbul Convention. We know that which have been successful in minimizing aspects of this normative gap. However, as you know, regional standards, as ambitious and strong they can be, they do not apply globally. And not only they reflect the need to discuss and to really reflect on the possibility to have an international instrument, but also how the regional instruments and the experience at the regional level can feed into this global conversation from our different perspectives. So a couple of years ago, representatives of Every Woman Coalition, that at the time represented some 1,500 civil society grassroots, I believe you are more right now, reached to our country to seek our support to call for a negotiation of a standalone treaty on violence against women. After careful consideration, Costa Rica decided to join their efforts together with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Antigua and Barbuda, and start a round of bilateral consultations, mainly at the level of Geneva. In the first year, I think this endeavor has gained some traction and support. We have other countries join. I mentioned Antigua and Barbuda, Sierra Leone as well. We have also heard from Special Rapporteurs in a joint call that they did, Special Rapporteurs on violence against women, of the support they give to the optional protocol. And of course, we have the experience achieved until now. I want to point out particularly to General Comment 19 of CEDAW, General Comment 35, but also, since we have the presence here of Madame Al-Salem, the importance that the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on violence against women, its causes and consequences, has given to the fight for justice, to the fight for women's rights, and to unveil the mysteries and the gaps that lie around this very important issue of gender-based violence. So in this new stage of the conversation, Costa Rica, together with the core group, has tried to come up with initiatives to expand this conversation. We fully believe that the greater involvement of the people in this conversation, of all stakeholders, the greater the outcome is. And so this opportunity today to bring a conversation that has progress in Geneva to New York, to brief you on this occasion of the CSW 68, is a very timely opportunity for us precisely to bring this to your consideration. What remains very clear is that this conversation, this process is starting. Discussions and consultations are ongoing, keep going both in Geneva and here. And Costa Rica, of course, taking into account all the sensitivities, all the questions that will arise around this initiative, need an answer, need ourselves to reflect carefully on. And what we pledge at this critical time is our willingness, our decision to come together with the core group, with you now in this room, but all interested stakeholders to really conduct an open and inclusive and a comprehensive conversation that could lead us to address the very specific need for an optional treaty on violence against women.
Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences. You have the floor.
Many thanks to you, Excellencies, for convening this meeting, and also Every Woman Treaty, and also for your wisdom, commitment to the cause of ending violence against women, and also for stepping forward to take this on and to launch this process. It is not a new idea, as we know. It's been floating around for a while, and my predecessors, three of them who are here, have also been very much involved in one way or another to advocate for this treaty. And they will surely speak to the history of it much better than I can. What we just heard about all of us being acutely aware, obviously, about the epidemic levels of violence against women and girls that we are seeing around the globe, and the fact that this situation does not seem to be improving. If anything, we're talking about real threats to any advances that have been made so far when it comes to prevention and response. Because in addition to the, let's say, traditional or long-standing forms of violence that we all have been fighting to end, whether it's domestic violence, FGM, obviously child marriage, we're seeing new forms of violence. You heard the Secretary General speak yesterday about the powers of the patriarchy, and I also tend to think that it's an intelligent being, the patriarchy. It reinvents itself, it permeates really everything, and it tries to also subvert our efforts. So we have to really remain ahead of it and also recognize when there are limitations to our global efforts. And I think those limitations are that we so far do not have a binding global treaty that spells out what violence against women and girls is and the ways to combat it, to prevent it, and to respond to the needs of victims. And this existence of a normative gap is really problematic, whilst recognizing obviously that a lot of advances have been made on the normative front, whether it's through treaty bodies, whether it's through the CEDAW committee, whether through its special procedures, and obviously, as mentioned by their Excellencies, the regional treaties on violence against women, whether in Africa, the Americas, in Europe, have also played a very important role in filling some of these normative gaps, in advancing the standards and building on standards that we have seen in the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination against Women. So it's by no means, when we say that we need a global treaty, it's by no means to underestimate or undermine the importance of what regional instruments have done, and also the work of treaty bodies and special procedures, including my mandate. I also want to say that, in my view, an optional protocol would really serve to bolster, in fact, and build upon the standards that have been established by the CEDAW. We know that CEDAW is one of the most widely ratified treaties. In a way, it's like the Bill of Rights for women. Yes, there are many reservations to CEDAW, we all understand that, but still it's an important sort of global standard for on women's rights and on non-discrimination for women. So by attaching an optional protocol on violence against women to CEDAW, it would build on these standards. Being optional means that, yes, states might take their time to join it, but if they don't join in the meantime, actually, they are still bound by CEDAW, right? So yes, there is perhaps no advances made, but at the same time, given that it's attached to the convention, it means that the harm will be contained by not joining or not joining yet, as I would like to say. And we know, obviously, that CEDAW already has an optional protocol, but it's an optional protocol that is looking sort of at more complaint procedures, but this one would be more of a thematic type of document. We also should remember that other sort of relevant pieces of global jurisprudence, whether it's the Vienna Declaration Program of Action, the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, they don't have also robust monitoring mechanisms. So we are still very much lacking that, although of course they are soft laws, especially the declaration, and also the general recommendations and the decisions adopted by CEDAW are of course important, taken into consideration. They have also advanced jurisprudence, but we have to remain honest that they remain soft law. We have to also remain honest that states do not feel that they are really bound by them very sort of firmly, and they not many of them may necessarily either refer to these decisions or actually use the general recommendations. Folks working in the human rights sphere, they do, but I'm saying in terms of state, the feeling of state responsibility vis-a-vis the CEDAW decisions and general recommendations has been, limited, unfortunately. So this is an issue. I would perhaps it's the moment to say also that obviously we have engaged the CEDAW committee in this discussion. We've had 2 sessions with the CEDAW.
Yes.
2 sessions with the CEDAW committee. The committee is obviously very interested in this, but the committee has a complex way of discussing and reaching agreements around issues. So one may expect this to take perhaps a bit more time. But we should also remind ourselves that those taking this process forwards are first and foremost states, right? So if the states have the political will to take this forward and want to commit to it, so that's really where the main decision making is. And I do want to say, as we heard, that there is a recognition that this has to be an inclusive process, that there is a central role for civil society and women's organization to play. And that the devil is in the details. Yeah, it depends how the consultation process is going to be orchestrated, what the architecture is going to be. But there are many promising ways to do that, linking, for example, any global consultations to more regional discussions that are more tailored to the situation on the ground. The other issue I wanted to say is that I'm hoping that the discussion on an optional protocol on violence against women and girls would also bring back the international community to a discussion that we don't really see on a global stage, which is discussing trends. Yeah, what's the global panorama? Yeah, what are really the challenges globally? Having a substantive discussion on that goes beyond discussing end of conference resolution or statements, but really taking stock of the situation, taking stock of the efforts, the advances, the limitations, the challenges. As you may know, the CSW could, in principle, have been the place where such discussion should take place, where you could also have developed, a global plan of action or more sort of monitoring mechanisms for some of these conventions and declarations that we have for the Beijing platform and plan of action. However, that has not really happened, as we know. So perhaps, therefore, then a discussion on an optional protocol would re-inject this momentum that we need to a global discussion. I also think that as I said, this discussion does not, while it of course brings risks that some advances on standards may be questioned. We do lack one global instrument that for which there can be ownership by everybody across the globe. Yeah. So I'm hoping that this can happen, and I think it was Rashida who said that the time for the optional protocol was not now; it was already yesterday. So with that, thank you once again for your interest, and thank you, Excellencies, for being with us.
Thank you. Also, the CEDAW committee asking for an optional protocol to end definitely globally as a global solution to ending violence. Thank you so much, Special Rapporteur. Can I leave the floor to Mrs. Dubravka-Simonovic, former Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its Causes and Consequences, and former Chair of the CEDAW Committee.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. Let me thank Every Woman's Treaty and representative of all core states, and also to greet my current Special Rapporteur and former Special Rapporteurs and all of you attending this important session. Why we are advocating for optional protocol on violence against women to CEDAW? You have already heard that we have issued a joint statement with current Special Rapporteur on violence against women in order to put forward ideas that would move all of you forward to support this idea. So we have already heard some data, but let me add a few more data. According to the UN Statistical Office, we would need 300 years to end child marriage. We would need 286 years to remove laws that discriminate against women and girls. So we are very slow at this point of the time with respect to international framework on women's rights and violence against women. So it is important to examine protective strength of this international framework, and I'm very glad that we are doing it at the session, at this side event, at the session of the CSW, because CSW was commissioned, that was established in 1946 to specifically focus on women's rights as human rights. And let us go back to the history to 91, when CSW adopted resolution on International Instrument on Violence Against Women. In 1991, CSW called for states to examine possibility for such an instrument. And then expert group meeting was held in Vienna, and at that expert group meeting, what was proposed was to strengthen reporting under the CEDAW Convention related to violence against women, because at that time CEDAW already adopted first general recommendation number 12 and called all states to report on violence against women, because we all know that there is no specific article on violence against women in CEDAW Convention. So for that reason, it was a very important step from the CEDAW committee. And CEDAW started under this process to examine violence against women under the framework of the CEDAW Convention. But in the same time, in 1991, that expert group meeting called for the establishment of the post of a Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women. So it was before the Vienna Conference, and that post was established. So now it's 30 years of the Special Rapporteur mandate. We are celebrating this, but it was clear recognition that violence against women is a human rights violation, and that should be under the scope of all those human rights frameworks and instruments related to human rights. And then that meeting from 91 proposed that declaration on the elimination of violence against women should be adopted. So declaration was adopted in 1993. It was first adopted at the level of the CSW, and then it was adopted by General Assembly. But then in the same meeting from 1991, you will see that founding mothers and fathers that were at that meeting suggested that declaration on elimination of violence against women should be considered for future substantive optional protocol on violence against women attached to the CEDAW Convention or separate convention on violence against women. So now we are addressing this issue again, but with additional knowledge between 91 and now, knowing what CEDAW committee did in the meantime with respect to adoption of General Recommendation 19, General Recommendation number 35 on gender-based violence against women, and I was myself 12 years in the CEDAW committee. So CEDAW is doing a great job with respect to all issues related to discrimination and violence against women. But nevertheless, if we look at what is needed and where we are today, and if we look at regional treaties that were mentioned, Belém do Pará as the first regional treaty on violence against women, then Maputo Protocol that is on discrimination and violence against women, and also now the Istanbul Convention that was adopted in 2011, but it is now the most comprehensive and detailed treaty dealing with violence against women. And myself, I was co-chairing at the level of the Council of Europe, that drafting committee that developed the Istanbul Convention. So it was very important also to recognize the need for legally binding instrument in order to provide all those steps that are needed to prevent violence, to provide services for victims, to punish perpetrators, and to have coordination at the national level. So now we need such instrument attached to the CEDAW Convention in order to have legally binding addition and expansion that would trigger states to examine their laws and their practices and put them in line with those legally binding requirements. We are seeing now that all those states that have ratified the Istanbul Convention, now also European Union ratified the Istanbul Convention, they have changed numerous laws. They have changed definition of rape. They have established new shelters and services for women victims. They have included risk assessment for police and others that are attending violence against women. So those are important steps that we need to see at the global level. So it could be argument, okay, states could ratify Istanbul Convention, but this is also argument that we need at the global level such treaty that will be under the scope of CEDAW and that will establish those steps that are needed. So let me just briefly mention, because I would like to give time to my colleagues, that when I was Special Rapporteur, I have also elaborated report on international framework on violence against women, its adequacy, because at that time it was call for a separate treaty on violence against women, and at that time I have also with CEDAW committee jointly worked on General Recommendation 35 on gender-based violence against women. So somehow we were thinking that this general recommendation maybe could be sufficient for states to move in right direction, but this is not happening. Only legally binding instruments are forcing states after ratification to really change their laws and practices. So at that time, I have also stated that in the long run, this optional protocol to CEDAW on violence against women could be a solution. And now I'm glad that RIM, as a special rapporteur, is pushing in this direction, because all of us here are supporting this direction with hope that you, non-governmental organizations and states, will expand this this kind of understanding that such instrument is needed for all of us to progress in eliminating and preventing violence against women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you so much, former Special Rapporteur Dubravka Simonovic. Let me now give the floor to Professor Rashida Manjoo, former UN protocol is solid to put end to violence against women and girls. Professor.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you very much to all of you for being here, first of all, and showing interest in this issue. And thank you to this panel, particularly to the core group of friends, Every Woman Treaty, the Special Rapporteur for picking up on this issue and furthering the developments, organizers and supporters of this event. It is an honor and a privilege to participate in this discussion, which I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, on the necessity for a new optional protocol. As some of you know, I was the third Special Rapporteur on violence against women. I advocated for a specific legally binding treaty on violence against women, whether in the form of a standalone treaty or an optional protocol to CEDAW. I held numerous regional meetings and side events on the topic, and the overwhelmingly positive response from civil society in particular was an indicator of the awareness of the normative gap in international law due to the absence of specific legally binding provisions. The lack of explicit legally binding obligations on states to act with due diligence in the elimination and prevention of acts of violence has resulted in impunity rather than accountability being the norm for this widespread and pervasive human rights violation. It's great that the situation has progressed to the stage that we are meeting here today with the political support of a core group of friends and also the support of the current Special Rapporteur and 3 former Special Rapporteurs. My colleagues on the panel have provided further information on the discussions to date, but today I want to focus on, we're sitting in the UN building, and I want to focus on why international laws matter. Beth Simmons in her book, Mobilizing for Human Rights, and Richards and Hagland in their book on violence against women and the law, cover this topic generally and specifically on violence. I continue to draw hope from their empirical work regarding the importance of international laws. The numerous global crises, situations that we're currently facing, has given rise to both the critique of the rules-based international order and the double standards, the bias, and the hypocrisy therein. But there is also a reliance on international instruments and institutions in the quest to address justice, accountability, and the equal application of international laws to South Africa, to all. As you know, South Africa is brought an action in the International Court of Justice on the issue of Palestinians, and as a fellow South African, my need to see justice, accountability, and the equal application of international laws is very high on my antenna. The re-emergence of social movements for more principled, fair, and just international order that values all human life equally is also visible globally, and we're seeing that currently, whether it's in Sudan, whether it's in DRC, whether it's Haiti, whether it's Palestine. Another important aspect of demands being made on the rules-based international order is the Global South advocacy and activism, which challenges the power and privilege of the global North, a feature that has been entrenched since the origins of the international system. These are indicators that international laws and institutions remain relevant, despite concerns about compliance, enforcement, value added, and weaknesses and shortcomings on many levels. Ultimately, there is acceptance that laws matter, whether at the international, the regional, the national, or the local levels. The international legalization of human rights reflects a commitment to a set of explicit legal obligations in protection and prevention efforts, as well as international accountability. International laws reflect politics in the negotiation and ratification processes, but they also reflect what are considered acceptable norms and behaviors that are equally applicable to all. They can alter politics by setting visible goals for public policy and practice, and thereby impose political costs for governments that do not comply. They serve notice to governments that governments are accountable and should refrain from human rights violations, directly or indirectly, and thus they have the power to constrain. The respect for international legal obligations is reinforced through monitoring, reporting, advocacy, technical and other assistance, and also through the avoidance of being labeled as outliers in the international system. The link between international instruments and national level developments is visible in its influence on shaping laws, policies, and practices to achieve justice and accountability, outcome, and impacts at the national level. Richards and Hagland, in their book, in their empirical study, investigate whether a state's signature and ratification of international human rights instrument has any effect on the state's actual human rights practices. They investigate whether international law drives the enactment of domestic violence against women laws, whether it improves respect for human rights, including human dignity, and whether transnational advocacy and activism play a role in national level change, among other issues. And many of us in the room can answer those questions in a positive sense. These authors also acknowledge that political, economic, social, and cultural explanations do play a role in the structure and enforcement of legal protections. Their findings indicate that international law appears to have an effect at the national level through establishing both norms and binding legal obligations, as it can lay the foundations for the enactment of domestic laws. And we know from the example of the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women, CEDAW, the Rome Statute that governs the ICC, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, have all contributed and led to diffusion and internalization of norms. The mobilization of women's movements nationally and transnationally has influenced political outcomes and has led to the ratification of treaties, thereby moving the norms from the international to the domestic levels. The authors indicate another important aspect, which is rulings by international bodies can affect national level systems. And in the absence of explicit domestic legal guarantees, the use of international laws by judges and lawyers can expand the meaning of domestic laws. So there are all these advantages. In addition to the foundational international law instruments, the further development of legal frameworks reinforces the specificity of fundamental rights, which all of us as mandate holders have reinforced in our reports. Treaties can lead to domestic legal and developments to justice and accountability goals. Simmons illustrates in her book, treaties provide a political, legal, and social resource to individuals and groups whose goal is to hold governments up to their promise. When they sign and ratify a treaty, they make a promise, not only to their citizens, but also to the global community. There might be a view that the development of non-binding norms is sufficient to effect change, and that we've been living with for 30 years, as opposed to legally binding provisions and instruments. Norms can be persuasive. None of us would disagree with that. But they do not create a commitment to a global standard that is public, that is explicit, and a promise to do something or refrain from doing something. As noted by Simmons, the voluntary sovereign commitment through the ratification of international and regional treaties gives rise to legal commitments and obligations, and it's a powerful incentive to stimulate national level change. With the adoption of CEDAW responsibility framework to address gender equalities and discrimination. Over the years, the deeper politicization of women's human rights has led to shaping changes that demand a shift away from viewing such rights as largely an important social goal and towards a holistic human rights issue. In 2024, it's time to discuss the further development of legal frameworks to reinforce the specificity of fundamental rights, especially the right to be free of all forms of violence against women and girls. When demands are made for international laws, we have to acknowledge and prepare, and this panel and all of you have to prepare for critiques, which would include too much legalization at the international level, challenges to the universality of human rights, views that some international laws are prescriptive, that social contexts and realities are ignored when we come up with normative systems at the international level, the imposition of onerous obligations on states, complaints about treaty body reporting fatigue, feminist critiques of international laws, including its patriarchal underpinnings and the stereotyping of women as victims. Ultimately, laws matter at the international and national levels. The participation of women in creating laws is crucial, especially in providing perspectives on the individual, the communal, the structural, and the institutional underpinnings of violence against women. We know that law is not a panacea for all ills, but it's a starting point in the realization of justice and accountability for human rights violations experienced by women. We can all be part of the solution in the quest for an optional protocol on violence against women and girls to CEDAW, whether through our advocacy, our activism, and our mobilization locally and internationally. Thank you very much for your
Thank you
attention.
very much for the support. Well, I'm here because I very much welcome this initiative of the three rapporteurs for the optional protocol. Unlike my colleagues, though, I have been very distant to the idea of a treaty on violence against women, and also very somewhat cautious about this very proposal of an optional protocol, because in my opinion, in the world conjuncture today, the problem is not one of normative gap, but a political one. I come from a country which welcomed and housed the ceremony where Istanbul Convention was opened for signature in 2011, and only 10 years later, the same government withdrew from the convention with just bypassing the parliament with a president's signature in a very illegal way, and nobody said anything about it. Neither the Council of Europe, nor the UN, or anybody.
We did.
It was a very silent.
We sent a letter to the Constitutional Court.
I know, but what did it do? Nothing.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is the multilateral system and its institutions, which was created with the founding of the liberal world order, is in crisis today. Let's face it, we are in a serious crisis. The minister talked about the difficulty in negotiation. Those of you who, by the way, the country that I was talking about, my country, anybody have any idea which that was?
Turkey.
Turkey, yes. I was very proud in 2011 being a citizen of Turkey. I'm still proud to be a citizen of Turkey, but not so much with my government, of course. But I find it outrageous that after all the work that has been done, that these things are happening, and we have very little power to stop them, unfortunately. But anyway, the issue is the liberal system is in a serious crisis, and I think when we talk about human rights, violence against women, women's rights issues, we really need to start thinking from before 9/11 and after 9/11. 9/11 was a devastating experience, but it was only the sparking of the crisis that was coming. 2008, the financial crisis hit everybody. And COVID-19, of course, made the system crisis a worldwide issue. And all these taught us that women's rights issues is particularly central to this whole crisis. And control of women's labor and women's body is more important today than ever before. So we should not forget this wider picture and not be naive about what we can do. But we must do what we can do. That's the point. We cannot surrender. So why am I now sitting here holding hands with my colleagues and supporting the optional protocol? Unlike Rashida, yesterday was not the time. Today is the time. Today is the time. Why is today the time? Because I think we are far more aware of the emerging right-wing populism, which is devastating the world, the authoritarianism that is affecting even established democracies, which is perhaps more subtle than it is in the more conservative countries. But it is a worldwide issue, and there are now some moves to react and deal with this world crisis. And one of them, which gave me hope, were some proposals on the table with respect to CSW. Now, those are very premature proposals, but I think we should hold on to those and push them. And I think, given that kind of a framework, the idea of an optional protocol makes more sense to me today, and that we should put all our efforts. Now, not because I think the optional protocol will fill a gap as such, it may, but more so because it will be a political message that can strengthen our efforts and your efforts at the ground level. So I thank my colleagues for starting this and accepting me as a latecomer among them. But from now on, I am fully in support of the optional protocol, Because you know, CEDAW is almost half a century now. What has it has accomplished a lot, but the world's women are still where they are. Let's face it.
Yep.
So we need to recognize that while we support the UN system, the international multilateral system, Council of Europe, and other regional bodies, we need to be fully aware of the real problem underlying this issue. Violence against women is not something that just happens. It's not something that has to do with individual, you know, people still talk about a poor, vulnerable woman or outraged men who cannot control their rage, so we should rehabilitate them, or misogynist cultures and so forth. This may all have some sense at the very micro level, but the issue is violence is an institution. Violence against women is a system.
Yes.
It is a system
A
along
trend.
with economy, polity, and civil society. So this system is intact with the other. If the economy is falling apart, if the governance is in where it is, how can we expect to stop and reduce violence against women? So this is sort of my opinion of the situation. I'm very much, as a social scientist, into the care issue, where I feel that unless we solve the problem of production and reproduction, which is at the heart of gender systems, we will not be able to move too far. Anyway, I think I started getting into an area where I will never stop, so I shall stop there.
Thank you.
But let's all hold hands and be very vigilant when the negotiations start,
Yes.
so that
Yes.
we don't fall behind existing language.
Yes.
We must be vigilant, diligent, and stand by with one another.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
And she made it and she came. Thank you so much. The floor.
Working on the CEDAW is one of the greatest achievements we've done so far as a country. You know, we've done a great deal in terms of ensuring that we reduce violence against women at all levels. But today, as the world increasingly goes to digitization, technology, we've seen that a new kind of violence against women emerges, whether it's through cyberbullying and this. So we should also pay attention and be focused on how we position ourselves or we strategize our commitments as countries in terms of ensuring we protect women at all costs and at all levels.
Yes.
We've seen economies that as small as my countries trying to make efforts in terms of ensuring that we ensure that the CEDAW is also implemented at all costs. But there have been some challenges, and some of these challenges are not only prone to Sierra Leone, they are also prone to many other countries, which is to ratify the CEDAW. It is a big challenge. Many countries have suffered this. We are doing so much that we don't capture what we do. We do not tell our stories well. So I think it is time for us as nations to work together to be able to tell our stories, to be able to ensure that we make all commitments and abide to those commitments. The laws that we implement as countries, we should ensure we implement those laws. You know, it's not only bringing out to establishing the laws, but implementing them is key, because if we do not implement, it does not have the required or desired impact that we're looking for. So this is just the short message I want to bring to you. I'm sorry for coming late. I was in my ministerial room giving my statement. So I wish I had got a long time with you. We can discuss further and learn a lot from other people as well. Thank you so much.
A historical moment. It is happening because we have our great 4 countries that are leading on this, leading the Porras protocol. So it is happening. But we need all nations to join also, so we need to help us all nations to be on board. And now we have like 7 minutes for Q&A. Do you have a question, please? The floor is yours, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for the gentlemen to join us. We need you to be on board.
Yes.
Yeah, up in the back, ask a question. Okay, Madam, please present yourself and ask a question.
Thank you so much, all your excellencies, for sharing your insights and for everything today. So generally my question is, and again, I apologize that this is mainly focusing on the U.S., but it's just the example, but for example, the U.S. has not ratified CEDAW, and this is nothing new. This has been happening for decades. And also, 40 out of 50 states, child marriage is legal. And globally, we have been seeing an increase of violence. I do believe this is, of course, because of world population increase and education. People had not known that they were victims, and now we are becoming more educated. But in instances like the U.S., for example, what can we do if we are having these barriers where we cannot actually enforce because we are not ratifying? And especially, it's a large country. How can we go about the change to make it happen?
What is great, is that the United States had signed but not ratified CEDAW, so they are allowed to sign and ratify an optional protocol, even though they didn't ratify the optional, the CEDAW Convention. So we need you to push with the US to join this optional protocol. This is what is great.
Yes, this is a never-ending story, of course, with the United States. Well, number one, keep pushing for your government to ratify. I don't have much hopes in that area. But the U.S. is many states. And at the state level, at municipality level, there are some work being done using CEDAW. I think those are good practices. I think we should replicate them. I don't think the government is, I shouldn't be very pessimistic, but I don't see in the near future. There was a short moment when you came close to ratification, but it may take a while. So, but I think you should think about how at the local level, at the state level, municipality levels, working with local governments, how new innovative methodologies can be used. And it is already being done, by the way. There are a lot of good practices in that regard. But keep pushing.
Okay. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Madam Rapporteurs and former Rapporteurs. Thank you, this whole committee. Actually, the U.S. state of Kentucky, myself and another woman, we have a binding resolution on CEDAW in the United States. We passed it in 2016, yet most people in the United States don't even know it.
Yes.
Okay, because it's oppression. So my other United States colleague, I am a delegate from Women Graduates USA. We support CEDAW. We have policies on non-state torture, the only NGO in the United States. I wrote the policy on human trafficking, and we are behind you. Women Graduates is behind you. We are small, but we are mighty. And I call on all women everywhere. Please help us in the United States, the women in the United States. If we could get CEDAW in the United States, we could do so much. I agree. It is political, absolutely political. It is, as you said, about the control of women. How do we know in the United States that we've lost so much?
Yeah.
So thank you. Could you please give me one bit of advice?
Yes.
How to go forward when we're being oppressed?
Yes, we will try to support, and we will have this conversation with our CEO, that is Lisa Shannon, that can help you.
Just letting you know, we're in active conversation with the White House Gender Policy Council. The Biden administration, they're members of the White House Gender Policy Council that were part of our SEED working group in 2013. And through advocacy, the U.S. is not going to ratify this, but there's no reason the Biden administration couldn't put a lot of support behind the Global South-led core group of friends and this effort, because the administration is supportive. So if you contact the White House and let them know you'd like to see that support, it would be very helpful.
I would like to know why this woman here, sitting here, who has passed the resolution.
Yeah. Thank you.
ladies and gentlemen, is there any question? Because we ended our time. Thank you so much, but we can continue the conversation outside. If you want to have a collective picture, we would love it to have it with you just outside.
Your hand is in my way.